It's that time again for We Want Winners. You see, if watching on video, you see Roderick Adams there hanging out. I'm Double G, and we're going to talk about what's been going on in 49ers world, but also what's about to come up because free agency officially starts this week on Wednesday. So you'll start seeing some moving and some action. I don't know how much the 49ers will be involved, but we'll talk about it. But first off, Roderick, what's going on, man?
Nothing much, man. Just kind of hanging out, doing my thing in my free time, studying this 49er free agency nonsense and really trying to get into the draft. But man, I tell you what, it's hard when you don't got picks until the third day. It's really hard for me to get amped up trying to figure out who the 100th pick in the draft is going to be. It's just that's a little too much for me.
Well, I started to think about it from their perspective too, because you hear how these teams do their board and whether or not they rank guys 1 through 100, or how they sort them and what the priority is. Like that seems pretty easy to do for the first round and maybe even the second round, but like 3 through 7, that's tough because you're just basically the entire process is based on who you think the other team is taking versus who's really going to be there.
Which is just, I mean, that's what. All right, there's a certain level of suspension of reality you have to go through to do just mock drafts, like you said, for the first round.
Yeah.
Because unless you do it like the NBC Sports Group, they have an advantage because they have these outlets all over the place, and you can, let's get our Cleveland Browns affiliate to do this, and then the Carolina, and so on. So you could do kind of because obviously we don't know, but if you're dialed into the team, you know their needs, you got an
Yeah.
idea of what they're going to do. So those kind of mock drafts kind of make sense. But other than that, if you're just one dude sitting there trying to figure out what the hell 31 other teams are going to do, it really gets silly fast. And then, like you say, I can even suspend reality to do that for the first and second round, but you start talking about the third and the fifth round picks, it just it's too much for me at this point. So I'm trying to study, but I'll get really invested at the end of day 2 and as we
Yeah.
go into day 3.
I think
And
that's how you have to do it because you can see who's sliding and you can
right.
see the type of player or the position that may be sliding as well. And then you can sort of go, oh, that person, from everything I saw, they were a late first rounder, and all of a sudden they may be
Right.
available in round 3, and then you can kind of dance around that. But yeah, it seems like it's a giant crapshoot. But then again, people get paid millions of dollars to talk about it and to study it and to talk to people and figure out who people are pushing and who aren't pushing and which teams are taking. So I mean, there's value in it, of course.
Yes.
I don't know if these guys really get graded. Like, I would love this now. This is where I would love the analytics to come in. Let's take Mel Kiper. Let's take Todd McShay, and let's create a grading system, and let's go back through all of their drafts and see who does better, and then we can decide this is the person we're going to listen to. That would be fun, but I don't think they would like that very much because the teams themselves, I'm sure, when they get the 2 years ago, here's the draft, and we have one player, like, that's not fun. Can't be fun.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about a couple of things. Just before we went on air, word came out that the 49ers were going to re-up to Sean Gibson, and it looks like 1 year, $2.9 million. He and Hufanga were the twosome in the secondary. And so I'm going to guess that means Jimmy Ward's time in San Francisco is done. It was probably done before the 49ers decided that Gibson was the guy. But 1 year, 2.9, and this is from a guy who I don't think a lot of people even thought he would, I mean, maybe he'd make the roster, but he sure wasn't on anybody's list to start last year, and he had a great year, and he made some money. Good job for him. He's still in the league. He proved he could play, and Niners bring him back.
He doubled up. He's making roughly double what he made last year, which and is still relatively affordable. I went through that Lombardi
And Barrow's exercise.
Girls exercise. We can talk about that a little later, but that was the number that they had assigned for him. It's one of the few that was really accurate. They've got they've got for example, they've got E-Man in there at like $4 million. There's no way in hell he's gonna sign for that. It's just everywhere else, like over the cap and spot track have him up around 15, 16 million if healthy. And even if he's not, I don't think he's gonna sign anywhere near $3 or $4 million. So that's that, but this one they nailed. And then there's another one that they've got that we're probably going to talk about also, which is Brendel. The number they've got for him is ridiculous too. So but that they hit this one, and he was on my final roster, so we got that one right. So we're like 1 for 1 so far.
There you go. So just thoughts. I mean, probably moving away from Jimmy, and Jimmy's going to be too expensive for them. And I think Shanahan made his choice last year, right? When he told Jimmy, you gotta, if you don't want to play as the third DB, then or the nickel, you're probably not going to play. And so that kind of told him, okay, here is how we value you, which means if you can find another team that values you as a starting safety, you're going to make more money. And for him, I hope he does. I hope he makes a lot more money.
Yeah, and that's what it's gonna that's what it's gonna come down to, because he just like it's the spot track has him as like $7 million is what the number is for safety, and that it's just hard. It's hard, man. To you start looking at that's what I've you think when you go through that exercise, it becomes clear quickly. Is that I went ahead and full boat. I restructured everybody we could restructure. So that was like Warner, of course, Nick being extended, restructuring Warner, restructuring Travarius Ward, and then Bosa. So that increased the amount of money that we had to work with like $12 million, which still, when you start talking about people talking about signing guys like Za'Darius Smith or pick your top level free agents, it becomes E-Man or
what does it say about McGlinchey?
Exactly. That's another one. Is it at $15 million, it just doesn't. You can't do, even if you wanted to, you can't. It's just because even going after mid-level free agents like I did, you still have a hard time coming up with 53 players without, because like on my final roster, it's like 8 or 9 draft picks making the 53-man roster. So, I mean, that's a crapshoot in the best years. But on my final roster, we've got like 4 or 5 defensive linemen who are rookies who would need to play. I mean, and it's hard to do, but I just don't see how you can fill out those spots the way they filled them out with even bargain level veterans. I mean, because it's the difference between what a rookie makes and what even a minimum veteran is like double. I mean, a mid vet makes like 600,000 or 700,000 more than what a rookie does. So I mean, you add that up to like 10 or 12 roster spots, that ends up being a lot of money over, spread out through the roster. So it's going to be interesting to see what decisions they made in terms of allocating their resources, because it was difficult to come up with good players or players that you would really, really want at bargain prices. They just don't exist.
Okay, so what does that say then about the value of Brock Purdy being the starting quarterback, in the near future versus Trey? Because Trey is going to be next year will be his fourth year.
Mm-hmm.
So then he's going to be coming up for renewal at some point, and you saw the dance that you had to do with the current salaries. You bump him up, and that Brock Purdy 7th round salary for a couple more years all of a sudden looks so much more tempting, right?
Well, I mean, I guess if in fact you believe that if you believe he's the better player, then I guess that's what you do. And if they're close, I guess that's what you do. But that's what that's just I don't see him that way. I need more data before I'm willing to make that leap. I'm not convinced yet. The 8 games didn't sway me into believing I'm not a truther yet. So I just need to see more. But yes, to your point, if he is what a lot of the fans believe him to be, then yes, that will definitely having him at like $1 million for the next whatever 4 years now, would be a huge boon.
Yeah, and it's not
To the
even
finance.
what I think. It's just what the numbers say and what the cap says is that if Purdy can be your guy at that number, he's so much more valuable than Trey at his number, unless Trey just severely outplays him. And that's the kind of dance that they have to do, though. That sometimes when you see cap decisions and you go, wow, why did they cut this guy? Why did the Rams trade Jalen Ramsey? It is because if they can find someone so much cheaper who maybe plays at 80% of that player, it's just so much more valuable to a salary cap sport, especially if your team isn't fantastic, right? If you're kind of in a rebuild.
It makes a lot more sense if you're in a rebuild than it does if you're a good team.
Yeah.
And also, those are never decisions that we've made at the quarterback position historically in this league. That, well, if we've got a number one, but we've got this guy that we think is 80% of what he is, that's just never been how the math has worked. Nobody's ever moneyballed the quarterback position, as far as I know. So that would be to do that would be, I mean, it makes sense to me, but again,
well, here's a real life example. Here's an example that I think fans would understand. Colin Kaepernick, as a 2nd round pick, playing at his salary, he was the dandy of the franchise. And the second that they had to sign him to a bigger deal, even though if you look back at that deal, the guarantee is not gigantic on that deal, but it's almost like they changed their minds about him very shortly after they had to sign him to big money. And it's just unfortunately, because of it's a salary cap sport, if you do not perform at that top level, which I think it's arguable that he did for that the second year when they missed the play, or when they missed the Super Bowl in the NFC Championship, but the team just degraded around him, and all of a sudden, like we said, when you're in a rebuild, oh, there's this giant number at QB, and we suck. So guess who we'd rather pay? We'd rather pay the guy who's going to come and pay for whatever the minimum is. So it's just funky how that works, and that's football's ruthless in of itself with a lot of the non-guaranteed money. But let's switch to Brock, because Brock went under the knife, and I will read from The Athletic by Jeff Howe and Matt Barrows. They wrote that he underwent successful surgery Friday to repair the ruptured ulnar collateral ligament in his right elbow. Purdy's expected to begin throwing in 3 months, so this isn't the reconstruction that we had talked about and that we were worried about. and he should be recovered in 6 months, which will put him near a week 1 return. Obviously, the surgery was delayed. His doctor was Keith Meister, who's a physician for the Rangers, and Meister has extensive background in elbow injuries, which are more common in baseball. So I know the guy's young, but we talked about this on the last show. Is because he's young, because he has his career ahead of him. I'm not sure. Not that I don't believe the week 1 thing. Like, I'm sure they want him there. But at some point, I think they will probably change that date. And I would be surprised if Trey Lance is not the starting quarterback week 1 of the season.
He would have to be awful. I would think he would have to be awful for them to for him not to be the one who to go all through training camp, go all through preseason, and then, okay, Brock, you're cleared. Here you go. You have no practices or very few practices, because I mean, if we just go by the dates that we're looking at right now, 6 months is basically week 1.
Mm-hmm.
6 months from today is week 1. So I just don't see how we go through the entire offseason program, training camp, preseason, and this guy's quarterback 1, and then that we just roll Brock out there. That again, I guess that could happen. I guess they could be so alarmed by what they see from Trey, and were so hardened by what they saw last season from Brock that they make him QB1 week 1. But I would doubt that. I would think that barring something really unforeseen, it would be Trey. And then as we move forward, it maybe goes to a kind of week to week kind of high school king of the mountain type thing, where if Brock is ready and he wants to call out Trey, take his job, then we do that. But yeah, so that I would hopefully by week 1 we're in a position where Brock is they're comfortable enough with him where he can be QB2, and then whoever the other guy is can slide into that 3 role, and then we're ready to roll for week 1. That would be how I would think it would play out.
We didn't have an opportunity to see this last year because, of course, Trey got hurt. But I wonder if Shanahan sees scenarios in his offense that if Brock is QB1, there are packages for Trey that are just so tantalizing that he does kind of mix it up here and there, just to keep defenses honest, including, certain scenarios where, you want to keep people thinking about it, right? Like, you guys have to kind of game plan for 2 QBs here. We're not just going to show you one look. Here's what we can do at Brock. And, oh, yeah, we got this guy who can throw the ball 75 yards on a laser and who can run. And you kind of have to pay attention to packages with both guys.
That's what you saw in training camp last year. Is it with Trey at quarterback, the defense has to defend every blade of grass from sideline to sideline, and from to the farthest end of the other goal line. I mean, to the other boundary. He can get the ball there from everywhere, and he did routinely. And the way he, I wish they don't let you record that, but the first day they did quarterback run game install,
mm-hmm.
It was a thing of beauty. It was a thing of beauty. He took it to the house twice. Once, the very first run was a 65-yarder around the left-hand side, and nobody, I understand it's not tackle, but nobody would have grabbed his flags. Nobody would have two-hand touched him. Nothing. It was he just outran the best defense in the league. It was beautiful. And then he took another one to the right side, 35 yards. It was just, and I understand people didn't see that, and all they saw is him get stood up and get hurt, and
Yeah.
oh no, don't run the ball. But I'm telling you, man, This dude, he's different. And I basically, just as a player's guy, I just want to see this dude get his fair opportunity. I'm a 49er fan, so I would love to see him get that opportunity here. But if they don't think he's the guy, just don't F him over. Get him out of here. Go somewhere. Let him go somewhere else and shine somewhere else. Don't mess him over. If Brock is your guy, then that's beautiful. There are 31 other places, or maybe not that many. There are other people that got quarterbacks, but hell, Houston don't got one. There are places where you could go, and I know that's not their job, is to put him in the best situation for him to thrive. That's I know that's not what they're in the business of doing. But that's what I want to see, is if it's not here, that he gets a shot, that his career isn't just derailed and short circuited here and behind some political BS. I just hope that doesn't happen.
The Packers may have to play a QB that they may not be in love with. There's the quarterback carousel. I mean, you said David Carr, Derek Carr. I always call him David. It's like without fail, I call him David. Derek Carr signs with New Orleans for big money. And, you see teams like Carolina. Carolina just trades up for the number 1 pick. So they're probably going to take a QB. They will need a vet behind that QB1. And so, it just happens year after year. You see quarterbacks move. Tampa is going to need a QB because Tom Brady retired. So there's going to be opportunities. And like you, I would rather see that opportunity happen with the Niners if he beats out Brock. If he doesn't beat out Brock, then yeah, you kind of have a big money player in your backup spot who is not a proven backup in that same vein as someone like that you would normally sign in that role. So it's kind of that contract can be a little bit of an issue if you are not in the starting role. So that's something that we don't have to talk about right now or really look at, but I guarantee that's in the back of their mind. Like, it just has to be, right? Like, if he's not starting, then his value is so much less as a backup, because we invested so much capital in this guy to not be our starting quarterback. They do not want to see that, but it may happen that way. Another person that the Niners re-upped, Colton McKivitz, 2-year deal, $5.8 million. If they believe McGlinchey is gone, you needed to bring McKivitz back. And how did he fit in your space that you were looking at?
Well, I mean, I put him there just because, by the time I was working it out, they had done that. I still think they need a veteran. And there's another spot that who vacated. You've got well, that's guard, so that's different. Brunskill doesn't look like he'll be back. But yeah, there's another offensive tackle spot that I has slotted in as another veteran minimum guy. But the guys that are out there in that space, like Billy Turner and that type of player, they aren't really good. They're just they're pros. So you're gonna either hope that McKivitz can step up and do the job, or that you can draft somebody, or that or I don't even know how you pronounce the Z-Man. What's Z-Man?
Yeah,
I don't even know how you
Zakelj, however you pronounce that.
Yeah, he's Z-Man to me. So maybe, because both of those guys are athletically, they profile as guys that, coming off the bus would be guys you'd want out there. But, we didn't see Z-Man at all. And when Moore has been out there, he's looked kind of lost. So, and McKivitz, he played well for Trent when he was out there. He's nowhere near the run blocker that Mac is. But he showed in his limited time to be maybe a better equipped pass blocker. So that'll be interesting. But I just can't believe long term that he is the guy they want to be the starting right tackle. He would be more of a guy that I would think you'd want to have as in like the Tom Compton role, who's kind of there as a swing guy, backup for both positions if you need him there. But because again, this is a team that the record is whatever it is when we rush the ball 25 times or more. And from what I've seen, McKivitz just isn't the guy that you want firing off, trying to, he's not going to be the mauler that Mac is.
Yeah.
He's just physically, he's just not that kind of player. And then you couple that with, again, I was coupling him with Brindle, but now it seems like that might be up in the air. But they are both he and Brindle aren't necessarily the same physical players that Burford, Banks, and Williams are, or Mac. They're a more of a finesse type of player. And at what point do you start to have a diminishing returns on a physical offensive line when you've got guys that that don't profile like everybody else? I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that, but that's a question that I have.
All right, we're going to talk about free agency in a second, but I just want to mention, because this is the first show of the week, I think we're going to go 3 shows in a row. So after Rod and I, tomorrow, Brad and I will come back with Thompson and Clark, and I'm watching this World Baseball Classic. Mexico is smoking the USA team right now.
Oh,
it's
really?
it's not looking good. And then on Tuesday, Brian and I will be back with the death lineup. We actually went to see, so I've seen Creed 3 twice, and I went and saw it at the IMAX because that's how they shot it. And I took my son, and so we saw it last night. And right when we were leaving, we're like, should we get food? Nah, we're good. And then as I was leaving, I found this little hole in the wall joint. And to say hole in the wall, I don't mean like, it's just in a spot where there is nothing else. And I was like, I didn't even know this was here. They're showing the Warriors game. So then we hung out and stuck around to watch the Warriors game. And we watched them come back against Milwaukee. It was Steph doing Steph stuff. But so we'll talk about that game. And then they play Phoenix on Monday. So we'll be able to talk about some games on Tuesday. And the last thing is we have a little March Madness pool, just a for fun pool. We'll have the folks on some of the shows doing it. We're kind of combining it with my sister network, the Fight Game Media Network, and just people who listen to both networks, whoever wants to join. So that is in on the Twitter, or you can email me, gg@bspnmedia.com, and I can invite you, send you the link there. All right. Now, the free agency period begins Wednesday. I think you can start talking to players Monday, maybe without tampering rules being in effect. So we'll probably start hearing stuff from the main beat writers for the NFL when it comes to reporting. And I imagine that stuff will probably start happening tomorrow or Tuesday, just because you can talk to people. But when you were doing this exercise, I think I don't know if fans expect any big names coming, but I would say if there's a bigger name coming, it has to be in a trade rather than during the free agent period, right?
I would think so. But the thing about that is I'm not, I know exactly what we've got in terms of picks now. But I don't really, between, I know that the trade is just about complete. But we had what we gave up for CMC. I don't even know what we have really in terms of picks to really trade anymore. I'm not saying that we don't have. I don't know. I'm not really caught up on what we have
as far as like next year and the year after,
right?
Because they got 11 picks in this draft. Holy crap! They got the maximum number of compensatory picks that you could get for one single year because of all the people that they lost.
Yeah. So that would be it. That would be my thought. But then even then, the trade doesn't mitigate the fact that you still have to make room.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to have the cap room, and that's where, like I say, you bring in anybody over, that's a $10 million player. It starts to get really scarce quick. So okay, now you filled that one spot. Now you still got another 9 positions that you still need to fill, with at that point $3 or $4 million, which gets just gets real tricky, where you start talking about vet minimums, and then hoping you're going to be able to pencil in rookies. And I haven't been able to. I've been researching, and I haven't been able to find out as it relates to prior years. Like, for example, the 2020 draft was kind of different in that people knew you're going to be able to get a lot of good players late because of the whole COVID thing. And so it was like 2 classes in one. That was like one of those years where it was going to be a super, super deep draft. And it ended up being that way. That year, I think we kept, it was like 10 draft picks made our roster that year. But it over the course of the Lynch Shanahan regime, it averages out to like 8 a season. There's like 8 rookies that end up on the 53. So that's where I ended up at this year with all those picks. 8 of them end up being rostered. Again, I'm just putting draft pick numbers in spots. Not really, I haven't really done enough research to be able to say the linebacker is going to be this guy or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be again, like most years though, anymore in the NFL, the draft is important. You need these guys, if not in the first year, their second and third, they need to play. You can't, the days of just replenishing your roster through free agency, it's hard to do that because, again, vets just make more than rookies do. So if you could pay a rookie to pay, to use your example before, to pay at 80% or 75% of what his veteran counterpart is, that's the decision that ends up being made.
Yeah, totally. Was there anybody that you had your eye on who you thought Niners could afford and who you may think, would be more valuable? So you just think it's the guy who they can bring back from their own squad?
Well, I mean, I thought, I went into free agency thinking that, it would be nice to upgrade that position. But if, the number that I initially saw was that he would be around a $3 or $4 million player, which kind of fit nicely into the cap. So, I mean, when you put that all together, that he's in the system, you kind of know what you get, even though he ranks out at like 20 out of 36. I mean, 20 out of 32 centers, which is, that's not great, but I know that, like, that it's not Madden, so you're not going to have all pros at every position. Some places you're going to have guys that are just kind of middle of the road players. And the offense ran with him there, so let's do it. But now what I thought was going to be a $3 or $4 million cap number is looking a lot more like $8 or $9 million.
Wow.
And at those prices, that brings, then now you're like right at the top of the market of the free agents that are out there. So, if I'm going to pay Brendel 9, I'm going to look at, that guy that I don't even know. And you started looking at other centers. I'm like, well, hell, this guy, they've got his value at 30, at 11. So, hell, what's $2 million between friends at this point? So
Right.
I didn't believe that his market was gonna be, and they say that Houston's gonna be in on Brindle. There's several teams, according to Mayoko's reporting today, that Brindle's gonna find a robust market, and that $8 to $9 million is not out of the question. So, and
Wow.
it sounds like 3 to 4 million is definitely out of the question. So, if that's going to be an interesting decision that they have to make there in terms of the center position, that I didn't think going in. I knew that Mac they were going to be challenged to meet the market for him, but I had not anticipated that Brindle could possibly, that his market could price us out. So that is going to be something. That's the place that I'm really interested to see where we're at, on Wednesday.
So there was somebody in the Discord threw out Ryan Kelly available for trade, but like you said, even these players who are available for trade, they still have salaries that come attached that you then have to fit into what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm looking at Ryan Kelly now and what his number is for this season, and I'm sure that it's high. Because he was, I believe he signed last year. Yeah, center. Yeah, so it's gonna be, it's real interesting to this is like, it's like relating to see what we're gonna be able to do. We're gonna be reshaping our offensive line. It looks like even more than what we initially thought it was gonna be. Like, yeah, his number is 14 for this year. Ryan Kelly's is
Yeah.
14.6, so closer to 15.
Wow.
That's like Mac money right now. I
Yeah.
mean, that's starting tackle money for a center. So I don't know that we would be. I mean, he's a good player for sure, but that seems a little bit rich for our blood. Unless you got a player going back the other way.
Yeah, totally. All right. So what about these 7 compensatory picks that the Niners received? So my thought was they could probably move up just because they have a lot, but you're probably not able to move into the first round just because it would take a few more than they probably want to pick up. Because, like you said, I mean, if what you said is true, where you have on average 8 rookies making the roster, the majority of those are going to come from your draft. There will be some folks that you pick up who don't get drafted, but in my mind, I was like, oh, maybe they could move up for a guy who they really believe in. But then I was like, wow, if you do that, then you just have less picks to deal with, and you're really trying to fill out certain positions, but also just depth for them because they're so heavy with really good players all around the roster.
Yeah, I think that obviously, I don't have a say, but I would rather just have um more shots at it. Just take, I'd rather have more um opportunities to get it
Hmm.
right than I would, bundling those together and try hit a home run, because I think we are in a position where um we need more depth than we do like one single individual player, because we're looking, or at least I believe they're looking, not just for this season, because I'm doing this study on draft picks and it just shows that it's rare that you get draft picks that late in the draft that contribute immediately, but you are expecting, if not this year, definitely next year, for those guys to start paying dividends, to start moving into spots, filling in for like somebody like Gibson, who is on a 1-year deal. You'd probably hope to draft somebody that can be an understudy and be ready to kind of slot in there next year, play maybe an ancillary role this year and be able to take a job next year. Same thing with at other positions, like maybe center or whatever you do. If you got um McKivitz at right tackle, maybe he is he a stopgap? I don't know, and hopefully that maybe that draft pick or Z Man or somebody else can be the guy that, because again, that's just how I see McKivitz with his versatility, is kind of being his role being like one step back and being kind of a swing guy, and getting somebody who's there is really uh RT1. But again, that's just the ecosystem of the NFL, is you're looking for those rookies to take the place of of more expensive veteran players. And that's how good teams stay good, is that, they're able to facilitate that happening rather consistently. So I would think having more bites at the apple would be better.
Okay. I wanted to talk about a couple more things. This is a little bit more, just speculation and where you feel certain players are going to go, because there is once this market opens this week, there's going to be a lot of attention on a player who we've watched day in and day out for the last 5 years or so, named Jimmy Garoppolo. What do you think Jimmy's market is, and where do you see Jimmy possibly going?
I think for the Jimmy market, I think what Aaron Rodgers' decision affects him a lot, because I would think, from what I've heard, that if that Rodgers to the Jets is all in his court now. Does he want to go to the Jets, or does he want to retire or whatnot? It seems like the Packers are ready to move on.
Yes.
So it seems that from the reports out of New York, that if Rodgers, for whatever reason, doesn't end up there, there would be a market for Jimmy there. It seems like he's got a market in Las Vegas. So if I'm him, I would definitely prefer that Jets situation to the Raiders situation. But I can also see that, being through all that he's went through, I wouldn't want, if the Raiders have some money on the table, I would probably, even though the Jets are a better situation, I'd rather have the bird in the hand than, standing around waiting for Aaron Rodgers to do what the hell he's going to do. So again, I think those are the two big Jimmy markets. And then after that, it's like, kind of all the rest of the situations are kind of crummy, actually. So if I were him, I would probably be trying to move sooner rather than later. But yeah, Jimmy's gonna make some money this because after Rodgers is off the board, all of a sudden, if you're a team that thinks you've got some prospects, you could do a lot worse than Jimmy Garoppolo, I would think.
He fits in either spot. I think he can play. He's going to play in New York. He's going to be at the hottest spots because he's Jimmy, and there's going to be a giant flashlight on him and everything that he does. And I mean, maybe that is not perfect for him, depending on whether he balls out or not. But I think he would like the at least off the field attention of a big city like that. And Vegas similarly too. Like, the thing about Vegas is they're still in their infancy of the Raiders, and they haven't had that guy sort of take over. Derek Carr was not that guy to really own that city, and Jimmy could definitely do that. Shelvin mentioned Houston. Like I said, they're and the Houston tie is if D'Amico liked him, right?
And Caserio drafted him.
Right. So the other spot could be, if I'm assuming Carolina takes a QB, that's why they traded up. Jimmy probably doesn't want to do this whole Trey Lance thing over again, where they draft him. They draft the guy who they want, and Jimmy's just there waiting. He probably doesn't want to go through that again, so I don't think that is going to be his spot. But
And in Carolina just sounds like a mess. How do you trade for the number 1 pick?
they gave
And
up a
now
lot.
And now they're talking about, well, they might be looking at Lamar too. Well, I mean, hell, if you're going to do that, you could have traded that draft pick.
Yeah.
You don't trade the number 1 pick. I mean, you don't give up what you gave up to get the number 1 pick and then turn around. I mean, not to say that signing Lamar is a bad idea.
We're going to talk about Lamar in a second here.
It's a great idea.
That
but
dude is.
If that's what you're going to do, then I wouldn't have done the other thing.
Yeah.
I would have decided whether or not I was going to do this other thing with Lamar before I did the other thing with the first round pick.
Oh, totally.
So the number 1 pick. So, you know, what that tells me that Carolina is just a mess.
Yeah, totally. They had to know that Lamar thing was out there, because we all have eyes. Like, we saw what happened at the end of the season, so this is not like new news. I mean, obviously the franchise tag is the news, but okay. Here's another player, and you mentioned him already. Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets seems to be on the table, and it's basically up to him. While I'm not the biggest Aaron Rodgers fan, I will miss him because the Niners and the Packers had a little thing going on. You know, over the years, we've played him in big games. The Packers have been better than the Niners, more so during his career. But, you know, there was the whole Alex and Aaron thing that we lived through from 2006, and then, you know, when Colin was good, and we're going into Green Bay and you know, putting up 40 points on them or whatever it was, and then even up to not last year but the year before, where we go into Green Bay and they're the number 1 seed and we beat them in the snow. Those are very memorable Aaron Rodgers moments, and I feel like that would, you know, I don't know. The Packers should be good just because of their history to the NFL, and it's good for the NFL that the Packers are good. If Aaron Rodgers is gone, I think I don't know. I think they're going to be in the bottom with Jordan Love at quarterback, or whomever they find to play QB. But, you know, and the other thing about that, and this is, you know, sort of what you were talking about, where teams kind of don't know what they're doing or not knowing what to expect. This dude, Jordan Love, hasn't played at all. And soon they're going to have to figure out if he's the guy, because they're going to have to re-sign him to a bigger contract. And that just sounds like a mess.
Yeah. Yep. You know, I have to admit that although obviously I'm a Niner fan, you know, my rooting interest as a youth, college-wise, was Cal.
Yeah.
So Marshawn and A-Rod and Deshaun Jackson, those guys, you know, they always had, you know, even though they played on different teams in the NFL, always had kind of a special place in my heart. And I never really forgave, you know, Mike Nolan for not making the obvious pick low so many years ago. I mean, how things would be different.
I mean,
if
think
Aaron Rodgers
of how coaching works, and you have all of these opportunities, even if you get fired or even if it doesn't work. Mike Nolan, just off of this one move, because he had the full reign of the organization, this one move essentially made him unhireable ever again. Right? Was he a head man anywhere? I know he was a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, because he's a brilliant defensive coordinator. Yeah. To this day, he's a brilliant defensive coordinator. But it's just, letting defensive guys make decisions on quarterbacks? I think if that didn't nail that coffin shut, it should have. He had no business being, you know, because a defensive coordinator is looking for completely different things in a quarterback than an offensive guy is. You know, he's looking at it from the mindset. Again, now, granted, I was having this I won't say argument, conversation with someone earlier this month that actually nobody really knows offense better than a great defensive coordinator, and vice versa. You know, we were talking about it in the context of Kyle and his input in the creation of our defense, which basically he molded it in the image of a defense that he would not want to work against. And the pushback was, what does Kyle know about offense? Well, hell, he knows all about offense because that's what he does. His job is to, well, he knows all of, what does he know about defense? His job is to know all the weak spots and find and attack defenses. So, and vice versa. Defensive coordinators are probably some of the smartest people you'll ever meet when it comes to the schematics and the way offensive works. So it wasn't that Mike Nolan was dumb when it came time to make a decision about a quarterback. It's just from a mindset, even in his quotes during the time, he didn't like Aaron Rodgers' swagger. He didn't like the confidence that and Alex Smith was basically more obedient.
Okay, isn't that what it was? Was I have all this power, and I want this young kid to recognize that, right?
And Aaron Rodgers wasn't that guy.
You mentioned those. You mentioned the Cal teams. My favorite Cal teams were Mike Pawlowski and Russell White at running back. Those were my favorite Cal teams. Oh my God,
yes. Those. I mean, we were never really great on a national level, but those were some fun teams too.
Yeah,
those were some really fun teams as well.
And Robert mentions Mike Nolan's contract with Reebok to make a sideline suit.
That guy was such a clown. All
right, last thing I want to ask you about, and you mentioned him already, is this Lamar situation. What happens? What can happen? If you're the 49ers, you have to sniff around. Not that you can really make anything happen. What would it take to bring him? Like it's almost impossible to do. But you're not doing your due diligence if you're not looking at least into it. And maybe the Ravens think Trey Lance was the top QB in that draft, and that's where the conversation would have to start. I think
the Niners, the only way they can get in is to negotiate with since we don't have a first round pick this year, so we can't just sign him and hope they don't match. We'd have to go to the Ravens and say, hey, what do you want for Lamar? So that's where that would have to start. And like you say, you have to make that call. At least, you're not doing your job if you don't make that call. But I've got a couple of thoughts on this thing. I don't necessarily think I see people saying, well, you see, he's not getting any offers. So that's, Pete says that people don't want to, aren't interested in Lamar. I don't think that's it at all. I just think that the Ravens don't want to be the guys that did what Cleveland did and be the second team to give a guy a bunch of guaranteed money. All guaranteed money. And I think that's where we're at with Lamar. This is the number I want. The number of years we can deal with, but I want my money to be all guaranteed. And that's where I think it's a collusion, not collusion type situation, because nobody else wants to be the guy that does that. I don't think the Ravens want to be that guy, but they don't mind if the Falcons come in and offer him that contract, and then they just match that contract. Right. And they can say, well, we didn't do it. We just matched it. So the Falcons can be the bad guy and not us. And I think it's on the other side that these teams aren't not interested. They just don't want to be the patsy to go in here, do all the work negotiating this contract for the Ravens just to say, okay, thanks, we're going to match and then, move on. So it's kind of that's where the stalemate comes in, is who's going to be the team that that puts the contract out there to Lamar. And I think there are several teams that could be in the mix. And I don't think that whoever ends up doing it, if it's not the Ravens, I don't think it's going to be a team that we were all who's a usual suspect team. I think somebody's going to come up and we're going to be kind of shocked that team was the one that did it. And then it'll be in the Ravens' court as to whether or not they match, which I just cannot believe that they would let him walk for 2 first-round picks. That's just nuts to me.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to think about. And
Yeah.
if you just base it on value and who's worth more, he's very much worth what he's asking. But like you said, that the Sean Watson contract is a killer for these teams, as is the Russell Wilson contract. Now, Wilson does at least have, a Super Bowl win, and he's been in big playoff games. So, you could talk yourself into, well, we probably paid him a little bit based on what he did than on what he was going to do. But this Deshaun Watson contract was all about what he could do on a good team. And man, like that really changed the market for what these guys are worth. And I want to see Lamar get the biggest bag possible because I think he's a really good player. They're going to use lots of things against him, I'm sure, or at least they will try. Him not coming back last year and maybe being hurt and for whatever reason not being happy, not being the greatest teammate. Oh, you've heard all of these stories. I don't know what is true and what is not true. I'm sure a lot of this stuff is planted by different people. But man, when you just talk about the guy on the field, he's so dynamic. He's a former MVP, and he is like you. And you've said
he's
this.
26 years old,
and you've said this multiple times on this show. Where the quarterback position is going, he's already there. So
it's just it. You talk about like 2 first, whatever draft picks. I mean, you could give me 4 first-round draft picks. How many of those draft picks will you spend trying to find a player of Lamar Jackson's caliber, and how many of those picks are going to hit on a player of what we've already seen what Lamar Jackson is right now? It's rough. It's rough to, if you know what you're getting with him, warts and all, whatever you think about him and his game. I just, I'd much rather have that than and pay the money. I'd much rather have that and pay the money than have a handful of magic beans and hope that I can grow in a Lamar Jackson. It makes complete sense, but it doesn't make sense to me because I get it. But I also understand it from the Cleveland standpoint. While they get dumped on for making that, they've had like 30 quarterbacks in the last 20 years. So if you feel like this guy can be the best quarterback that your franchise has had since Bernie Kosar, at the most valuable position in the sport, I do that because while there's a sticker shock to 230 million guaranteed, it's just like anything else. Aaron Rodgers is going to make damn near $60 million this year. That contract is not going to look crazy 3 or 4 years from now. That number will be, it'll be right in line. It's just like every contract. When Kirk Cousins signed his $84 million, everybody's like, oh, shock and awe. What is he, but by the time he got to the end of that contract, that number was, that was where the quarterback market was.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of money, like the Mahomes contract. It sounds like a lot of money, but again, already $45 million a year for Patrick Mahomes is a steal. It's just those numbers you have to like suspend what you think about that number is and know that market is that when was the last time that quarterback market went backwards?
Right.
It just doesn't. It's always the next guy is gonna be. So what is Burrow gonna get? What is Herbert gonna get? What is Trevor gonna get? Those numbers are just going to keep escalating. So if I can get a guy that I know can play at an MVP level and can make my running game instantly better, can make my pass make my pass blocking instantly better, can make my defense instantly better because they're not going to be on the field as much. That's all the things that you get with the Lamar Jackson package. Sign me up. Sign me up twice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm sure, there are going to be negative things coming out about him just to try and maybe get that price down. I don't know. That whole thing bothers me, but I get the dirty business side of things, and I hope not. I hope.
It really hurts him that this is where the game hurts him, that he doesn't have an agent, that he doesn't have anybody out there spinning a counter narrative to whatever the Ravens narrative is or the league narrative is around. And he's got it on two fronts, because I definitely believe it's a league narrative the league does not want. They have clearly stated that they don't like the fully guaranteed model and will do whatever they can to not have that be the norm.
Yeah.
And of course, the players association and everybody associated with them, they want everybody. They want it to be like as much like the NBA as they can make it. So, that is, you're right that there is definitely some dirty pool and some mud that will be slung in the service of not fully guaranteeing Lamar's money.
Okay, one last question here, and this is about Lamar. He seems to be a very cool dude in the community, but he doesn't seem to be maybe the biggest team cheerleader necessarily, kind of the person who you have doing team stuff. If you pay him that money to be that guy, is the expectation that maybe he does more things to present the team, to market the team, than he may be comfortable doing? Because that's the only thing I can think of where maybe you don't feel like you're getting your value is in the PR scenario of this whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It does seem that, I don't know that Lamar is as corporate as you might want your quarterback to be. It seems like his teammates and dudes around the league just love him. The players are definitely watching and not happy about the way that Lamar is being treated. But I can see your point that he's maybe not Tom Brady or or Russell Wilson, those kind of guys. And even like, but I don't know, Aaron Rodgers is not really that kind of, he's kind of
only when he wants to hang out with Pat McAfee.
Yeah, he's kind of but even then he's like more Joe Rogan than he is Pat McAfee even.
Yeah,
for sure. But he's kind of out there. So I don't know, but I think you're right though. It's definitely something, I would think franchises want that, when you pay that kind of money, although, the obvious comparison that we just been making is Deshaun Watson's kind of hard to market.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Just saying.
Impossible.
Just saying.
I mean, they obviously didn't care about that part, right?
Talk about radioactive. I mean, but yeah, it's just, that Deshaun Watson contract is, we're going to be talking about that the league they want you to forget about it. But that was you talk about a turd in the punch bowl. That was it. That was it.
Yeah.
But just even with Lamar, if the numbers that they're talking about, they're talking about 130 guaranteed, which is less than what Kyler and Russ signed, which is just ridiculous. So even if you don't want to match what the Deshaun Watson contract was, the comps of Kyler and Russ, He's got to make more than both of those dudes, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
you'd take him over Kyler 10,
For sure.
10 out of 10 times.
For sure.
All right.
Yep.
All right, that was fun. We'll be back in a couple weeks to do another one of these, and the draft will be coming up sooner. Once we record again, we'll figure out what we want to do around the draft. The Niners aren't even going to have picks on day 1 or day 2, more than likely. So we'll be day 3 watching and paying attention. And then yeah, I mean, if anything happens where all of a sudden there's a big move that we don't see coming, then maybe we can get something going as well. But it was a lot of fun. As always, I love talking to Rod about this stuff. He is a student of the game, and you and my son both do this thing where you go, and this is not a dig in any way. I think it's your personality where you go, yeah, I do my homework, but I'm not the person who, I don't live in the X, Y, and Z, and how you sort of talk about your opinion. You can say whatever the heck you want. Your opinion is so studied. Your opinion is so relevant. You do more homework than any fan that I know when it comes to this stuff. So when you speak on it, you do not need to put that little prefix to what you're saying, because I think your opinion is so highly valued, especially to me, and I'm sure to the listeners.
Well, I thank you. And as I said before, even when we started this, that, I so value you creating a platform where that study kind of, it makes me feel like I'm not just, wasting my time or doing
Right.
something that is not, I enjoy it. So it's, it's cool. But now I like have a reason to do it and have a place to like share it. My opinion. And I know a lot of people don't agree with it, and that's fine too. I like that give and take as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for acknowledging it and giving me a place where I can share.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We will be back in a couple weeks here, unless we need
With
to
some
be
free
back
agent
sooner.
signings, hopefully, to
Yeah,
talk about.
we'll have some news. That there will be some stuff happening, not only with the Niners, but also across the NFL, which I know a lot of 49er fans do pay attention to as well. So, all right, we'll be back a couple weeks. For Rod, I am Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.